not even be considered citizens of that country. So I have three arguments in this debate. First of all, I will categorize what is citizenship and what it means to have a citizenship. Second of all, I'll tell you why this is better for a country at large and for its society. And third of all, I'll tell you why some countries will inherently need to do this in order to get more people into their army. My partner will talk more about these foreigners themselves and how they need their rights ensured. First of all, an unneeded policy. We're going to get people that serve for a certain amount of years that countries decide, and they don't necessarily have to be in combat roles. And if they die before getting that said citizenship, then their children, etc., will get it. This is unnecessary. So, first of all, I'm going to ask a question. I haven't said anything. Thank you. No. Oh, okay, so if not giving them citizenship, then what are the other options? So this is what we're expecting for opposition. Either they're going to tell us we're just going to give them money as wages, which is very bad because it's not any normal job. You can't guarantee loyalty and you can't guarantee accountability. No, thank you. You can't guarantee accountability, or people can just pick up and leave, which is extremely dangerous in an army. Second of all, the other option is to not take in foreigners at all, which for many countries is simply not an option because they don't have enough people to have a decent army, and that when you do that and you don't let foreigners be in the army at all, you're marginalizing a large portion in some cases of your population. Yes.
What about the option of allowing foreigners to come in and invest as opposed to letting them serve in the military?
I don't know how this is relevant. They can come in and invest, and they also can come in and do So, moving on. Citizenship. We believe that having a citizenship means that you have a certain set of rights and a certain set of obligations to the country. And we think that people are eligible to get it if they invest money, if they live a certain amount of years. They have to pass a language exam, I think, that's about it. But the idea here is that we give people citizenship to countries for a myriad of reasons, and we don't see any reason why serving in the military, which could be the ultimate sacrifice that actual citizens of the country don't do, we don't see why this shouldn't be an incentive enough for the countries to give these people citizenship. So, when you have this citizenship, you have the right to elect, and you have the right to vote people, you have to vote on people, you have the right to elect yourself even, and we believe that no sort of compensation, whether it be money or anything, would be sufficient for these people, considering the sacrifices that they're possibly making, and considering the sort of work that they're doing. We believe the only way to sufficiently compensate them for all of this is to give them the full rights of a citizen, to allow them to have a stake in the country that they are protecting. They are already willing to give up their life for this. So we believe that they should be able to shape the future of this country, right? No, thank you. And so it's very important that these people stick around, vote, and have a lasting, sustainable impact on the country instead of just serving for a few years and then picking up and leaving, which is an obvious security risk that I don't think anyone gets. Second of all, it is better for the country. So now, when you tell countries that in these years are much different than they used to be, when you tell these countries that you have so many refugees, you have so many immigrants, you have all these people from all over the world, I truly believe that it's much better for these people, much easier to assimilate if they have Russians going into the army. So it is much less likely, for example, for a white Swedish person to be extremely racist to an Arab if they know that that person served in the military, or if they know that other people also serve in the military, right? It's going to make it seem a lot less like they're coming to steal our jobs. You can't really say that they're stealing your job if they're serving your country and they're willing to die for your country. So we believe that it can be very helpful. Can be very helpful in removing stigma and removing bad stereotypes from people that are immigrants, from refugees especially. And so it can tell people that these people are not so bad after all. Finally, Sweden, again, they literally are struggling to find an army, right? people there are very well educated. They can find jobs pretty much any field that they want to. They just have to take. And so the incentive, no thank you. So the usual incentives for people to go to the military, which are, I'm not smart enough and I need money, is not exactly evident there, and so they don't find enough people to join the army. However, they have hundreds, maybe hundreds of thousands, I think, of refugees that will be very willing to join the army, right? And they have a lot of people that could join the army, but the incentive is not there, it's not enough for them. So if you are, no thank you, if you are, say, a refugee in a country, you're much less likely to be willing to give your life for that country when you're being discriminated against, when you're being marginalized, and you're being looked at like this parasite, right? But if the government actually tells you, come in and we will give you a citizenship, you will become part of this country, then they have a much greater incentive. Second of all, they might not need them because they don't have the numbers, but they might need them for a myriad of other things. So it is almost inevitable that you will have foreigners in the army, right? Armies employ locals in countries that they go to, they employ translators, etc. I don't think that there's any army on earth that does not employ people from different countries that they want that army operates. So it is inevitable to do this, and the only way to compensate them fully for the kind of service that they do is if we give them the rights that come with citizenship. So we are telling you that this is better for the country and better for the society that it lives in, better for marginalized groups. We are telling you that it is sometimes essential for the country because they simply do not have enough people in their army. And finally, we are telling you that simply because of how a citizenship works, and because in recent years you don't need to be a fifth generation person from that same country to have citizenship, right? We're willing to give people a citizenship for living in the country for a few years. We should also be willing to give them citizenship if they serve in the army and die for them. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for the fine speech, and I would like to invite the leader of opposition.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so what have you heard from this side? Basically two things, that out of compassion, we should allow these people to have citizenship because they have certain sort of sacrifice, and that they believe and love your country more than you do, perhaps, because they're sacrificing themselves in ways that most citizens might not. And that for some reason it helps assimilation, I'll get to that later, and that there's economic benefits that come from this. So on the first point, right, we have to be somewhat cautious here. I don't think necessarily that partaking in violence on the part of a state agent necessarily equates to actually being loyal to that nation. It may very well be that they're mercenaries, right? That they're working for a time for this nation, for their own goals. Say either out of sheer desperation, right? Like they need the money, simply need the money, or that they're attracted to violence, which is very much a possibility. I mean, just look at the Middle East. There's many people who are willing to give up their lives for a cause as meaningless as that of the ISIS. So, I mean, it's certainly a possibility. And they may want the many benefits that come with citizenship, without necessarily valuing what citizenship has. So what is citizenship, necessarily? And they have failed to explain it really, precisely because they think, I don't know, it's just something you can give to anyone should they do something. But what is citizenship? It's basically a statement saying that, look, I value what your society has. I have subscribed to the social contract that most of your citizens also agreed to. I value democracy, freedom of expression, etc., and all the things that come with it. And I have served the community in some meaningful way. And therefore, I have earned the right to be a citizen and share your community, right? Oh, thank you. So, one problem with this, right? Why do we think, and why is it even reasonable to think that military service is the only way, or in any way, why do we value military service over any of the other things that people applying for citizenship could do, right? That's one problem. The other problem is that, I mean, they might not subscribe to the values that those countries hold. You may open the door to barbarians, it's not barbarians, but the point is, people who don't share your values in your society, people who are violent, people who might not like democracy, might not respect the same people within your community. Those are the risks, right? And it's unlikely that those people will be likely to assimilate. More likely, you're going to get these violent people into your military, and as soon as they exit the military, they'll have all the problems come with it, right? All the PTSD and everything else, all the trauma. And on top of that, not hold the same values for the country and the respect for other people within a community. Therefore, it's unlikely that people will be assimilated. It may very well confer some sort of respect amongst the community, but it's unlikely it might actually transfer to any sort of change in their behavior, right? And that's probably more important. Now, okay, I'll take a closer.
If I don't agree with the values of the country, why would I be willing to fight for that country and sacrifice?
Right, as I explained already, right? I mean, I've already explained this. Basically, you can do it for a myriad of reasons, right? There are many reasons why you might not partake in violence on the part of the state. This requires no political study. Now, so what is adequate compensation? Wages. So so they thought, okay, look, we don't necessarily trust these loyalty from people who are simply giving wages to. So thinking like, okay, why not? Let's give them citizenship, right? I mean, this is a line of logic that they had. Basically, anyone who's serving in the military, I mean, we're not willing to give wages. That's far too dastardly. We're giving citizenship instead. Clearly, that's one step too far rather than one step back, right? You should first ascertain the loyalty of the people before you do anything else. So wages are perfectly adequate, right? You serve their interests. You serve their desperation. You serve their need for compensation for their service. No more. For citizenship, you require that shared value, that shared commitment. Now, onto this idea that this might be problematic in terms of a sense of militarism. What are the societies that might value this as a means of citizenship? Let's look at the French Legion, right? The only reason why the French Legion was allowed to exist is because the French society was not prepared to give rights to those colonial subjects immediately. Instead, they thought, look, the only way you can actually get it is if you serve our military for a time because we are in urgent need for it. It's not because we actually value as people. It's because we think that right now we have in such a deficit that we're willing to allow you, commoners, to join our military and work on our behalf, and then maybe give you citizenship. That was the contract. And we think that's a more likely situation than whatever they're hoping for, because the only reason why the governments might choose this as an option is because they don't think that whatever other commitments that people applying for citizenship may make are valuable enough, right? So what would this mean? It means that you cheapen the efforts upon illegal immigrants or people applying for citizenship when they've been part of the community for, say, decades. They've been paying their taxes. They've been obeying your laws. They've been contributing by providing some valuable service to your society, right? They've been working jobs and such. So that we think that should be valued immediately, right? There should be no further threshold on which to burden these people who are applying for citizenship. And we shouldn't, at the same time, lower that threshold to whomever might be so desperate as to choose military service over actually serving in those societies to begin with, right? Because that comes with many other uncertainties, right? Because that aspiration is for for self-gain rather than actual shared commitment and values. Now, there's also, especially in this time, right, it's unlikely that governments require the sort of manpower at all, right? We assume that serving the military necessarily means you're doing a necessary task to the state, but that's no longer true. Most of the more important tasks that the military does are done through machines, right? Through drone strikes, through nuclear weapons, in terms of just mutual shared destruction, right? Just make sure that you have defense. That and precision missiles. All these things don't require the sort of same manpower as previously. So it's unlikely that they're even making the same commitment as you may imagine. Okay, so on the problem of assimilation, right? So as soon as you open the doors to many of these people, sure, there might be some respect, comfort to them, but then you have to deal with long-term results, right? Because you have attracted these violent people who are attracted to violence, who have experienced violence and require support, because they're desperate and therefore probably chose this option over almost certain death. You have to be somewhat skeptical about how well they will integrate to society once that task is done. We would rather value long-term commitment made to that nation, that is, living in that society for quite some time, learning the language, doing an important civil task, partaking and obeying the laws. We think that is far more reliable a measure of the loyalty given to that nation than anything else, right? And we think that should be valued at the end of the day. And these things are mutually exclusive, right? The only reason why you value this over that is because you don't think this is enough of a requirement. because we think that military service is somehow triumphant about this task. And we think this should be valued before anything else, and no further threshold is required. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for their fine speech, and I would like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to present their remarks.
What we got from side opposition is a focus on the threshold of giving the citizenship and how governments don't require the manpower anymore. And I will try to go refute their points quickly and then move to my main point. First of all, they said that those people will get into the military, get the citizenship, and they don't necessarily agree with the values like democracy, like freedom of speech, like all these things. We don't care. Some people inside these countries actually don't even hold these values. Some already citizens. That's point number one. Point number two. I can apply for a citizenship in, for example, the Netherlands after staying there for 5 years, and then think that freedom of speech is abhorrent, and they will accept me. They don't ask me, do you agree with freedom of speech and democracy or not, and then decide. It's like the example is bad. Okay. And then they said it's harder to assimilate because they wouldn't necessarily have the same values. Okay, point number one, this is an assumption. You will assume that these people will not have the same values, which is a very weak assumption because it's more likely to sacrifice yourself to a country that you hold the values for. You will find Afghan and translators helping the United States against the Taliban because they think that women should have education or that freedom of speech is important. So I think it's more likely to agree with a certain country's value when you are willing to sacrifice your life for it. This is point number one. Point number two, they said that wages are adequate, and they made a point about loyalty, which is a very important thing that I will build upon later, but no, thank you. But let me just say the sentence now, that the loyalty of a soldier that is hired by money is to the highest bidder. It's not to the country. Okay, so wages are not adequate. Okay, and they said that governments don't require manpower anymore, which also I will talk about in my speech. So let's move forward to this speech. They said that, generally, it's almost inevitable to need forms. First of all, your population might not be adequate. In some countries, the whole population is less than 500,000, and they're next to Russia or other huge military power. If they enlisted every man, woman, adult, and child, it would not be enough to actually counter any sort of military offensive on their countries. It's almost inevitable to hire or need foreigners. This is point number one. Point number two. As my partner has said, some countries actually, when they give the option to the population, some of the population are not willing to sacrifice themselves. They just don't think that it's worth it, or they have enough courage or ability to actually serve in the military. This is point number two. Point number three, some scientists, and as my partner has said in the definition, it doesn't have to be an actual violent participation in the military. You can be a scientist, you can be a drone operator, you can be anything. The point of this is that we're trying to say that you will need foreigners, you will need translators, you will need them. It's almost inevitable in many cases. This moves on to the next point about what about the rights of these foreigners and what about the rights of these foreigners? If they're hired for money, how can you ensure, if they did something bad or when their service is done, the government or the military will actually stop giving them money. And this is problematic, as we have seen with the Afghan with some Afghan translators who helped the United States when it was in Afghanistan and gave them intelligence and gave them translations and helped them locally. The United States didn't give them citizenship; it only paid them. And after the United States left these villages or anywhere, they were targeted by the Taliban because they almost have no rights. The country does not feel obligated to help them because they do not have a citizenship. So why would the country care? They're giving them only money. What we're trying to say is that when you give them citizenship, you're ensuring their rights. They now have the protection of the government, and they now have the rights that the government would give to any citizen. those Afghan people I'm telling you about, they have been struggling only to get a visa to go to the United States. And they have the military, and some of their families have died. So this is a very grave situation. When you inevitably hire foreigners to translate and help you locally and not give them the rights by citizenship, it is dangerous for those foreigners, and you will lose any sort of incentive, and those foreigners will lose any sort of incentive to help this military further, which would hurt the military, and as we've said, not having these rights would hurt the foreigners themselves. And then we move on to accountability, because when these people are not citizens, how can I sue them? How can I sue a Colombian mercenary in Blackwater who did something bad in Iraq, for example? Because these people are now hired for money. I don't know who they are. I can't find, like, how they're foreigners, as I said. Where's the accountability? How will the military hold them accountable? No, thank you. If they were paid, okay, the military will hold them accountable by stopping the payment. But what about the families or the people who died, or these consequences of, no, thank you, of being in the military? So the accountability part is very important. We need to hold those people in the military accountable. And if they are not citizens, if they are foreigners, go ahead.
Where's the accountability for America invading Iraq?
I think this is a very different topic. We're talking about the foreigners in a certain military, about their rights. Like, the accountability can be achieved there by their judges, or it's totally different debate we're talking about. But we're trying here just to pinpoint, if you're talking about accountability, we have seen examples of soldiers in Fallujah and making very bad and very abhorrent actions inside Iraq, and they were tried for it and they went to jail for it. So accountability exists to an extreme extent. But second of all, if these people are not citizens, how can the country actually hold them accountable? Because they are citizens, for example, of Russia, and they served in the German military, for example. And then those people did some horrible things, and when they were when the Germans tried to try them or hold them accountable for their actions, the Russians said, no, we need our citizen back. This is our citizen now, and we need them back. So the accountability part becomes very tricky, because when those people make something bad, which is almost inevitable in a military where lives are at stake, you need to hold those people accountable. This is point number one. Point number two about the loyalty. The loyalty, if you give them money, those foreigners' loyalty will be to the highest bidder, not to the country. When you give them citizenship, they have even more incentive to actually serve this country and to actually help them. Because if, for example, they were hired by the American military and Taliban came to them and told them, hey, we'll pay you higher, but give them this stupid intelligence, they will take it, the military will take it, because they hired those people. But now their loyalty is not to the country that they're enlisting in, the loyalty is to the highest bidder. So when you give them citizenship, you give them a stake. You give them, they want you to win this war, and they will help you win it. But wages are not adequate, as they said. And finally, we preempted this, that the possibility, or no need to do that, wait, give me a or something. But just to summarize real quickly, we told you that it's almost inevitable to need foreigners, that these people will need their rights, and we should give them these rights, and to hold them accountable, we need to give them citizenship. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for their fine speech, and I would like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, hi. So, a couple of points. For some reason, they make it seem as if the only possible option for anyone in another country to gain citizenship in another country is through mercenary work, which is either through bribery by offering citizenship and so on and so forth. They didn't really consider the possibility of allowing foreigners to integrate into societies, either through investments or by emigrating to another country and serving the population over there. So, a couple things which would, before I get into my main points, just a quick point of reputation. First of all, they focused heavily on military immigrants, as in people who are fleeing Afghanistan, people who are fleeing Syria, as opposed to the vast majority of migrants who are economic migrants, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, there are over 1 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa who are dying of starvation, who are dying of poor economic opportunities, who are dying of violence, of so many potential reasons. And ladies and gentlemen, we do believe that immigration is one way. It's from sub-Saharan Africa to the Western world. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we believe because humans, unfortunately, are inherently selfish. We don't really blame them. I mean, humans are looking for what's best for themselves. If they can find better economic opportunities in other countries, it makes sense for them to want to go there. However, should this country, for example, accept a citizen of another nation, they must have some way of of ensuring that one, like the citizen is going to be of benefit to them. Two, that citizen shares the same like ideals, same values, and so on and so forth as a community. And what we're trying to prove to you, ladies and gentlemen, over here is that by serving in the military, you do not meet these requirements. You do not meet these things. They also did mention the notion of that people, for example, that there are many people who. What's it called? Who, like the greatest thing that they can possibly sacrifice is their own lives. And the fact that they sacrifice their own lives tells you they must want it really, really badly, and therefore they will integrate properly into such society. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm trying to tell you over here is that the people who are trying to migrate, these are people who value their life so little to the point where they're willing to risk even their own lives, to go into other opportunities. No, thank you. So, for example, those in sub-Saharan Africa, they're dying of starvation. They're dying of fear. They're dying of so many things. People in Afghanistan, people in Syria, they're dying because they're in the middle of a civil war right now. Ladies and gentlemen, their lives are already at risk. By saving these countries, that's a guaranteed chance of death. By serving in the military of another country, for example, such as the United States, no, thank you. By serving in a country of such a military such as that of the United States, what you're effectively doing is that it's like they now have the option between guaranteed death by saving their own country or a small chance of death of serving in the military, in addition to a much larger chance of potentially surviving. Ladies and gentlemen, I think anyone can see which side they would want to choose. Second of all, ladies and gentlemen, I shall take it right now.
We can constantly see this where people have to make this choice by jumping in boats. So what difference does this make if we can actually guarantee them something tangible?
Ladies and gentlemen, I think they're just a little bit confused, and I'll address that point later on. Another big issue for them, which they have not really addressed. So far, ladies and gentlemen, they have not really given any mechanism by which they can ensure national security. For example, these translators or these people who are serving in Afghanistan, they don't mention, for example, any mechanism of either background checks. They don't mention any way in which they can, for example, guarantee their loyalty. How does the military know? That's going to accept them. How do they know which side they're on? We also believe that a key notion of citizenship is promising you loyalty to a country, and if that loyalty can be guaranteed, then the whole value of citizenship is worthless. Another point which they mentioned is that in some countries such as Sweden, there is a tremendous divide between the refugees and the needs of that country, and by allowing these refugees to serve in the military of that country, there will be discrimination. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that really isn't the case. It saddens me to see, for example, in countries such as Qatar over here, there's a significant difference between the Qataris of Persian origin as well as the Qataris of Oak origin, or even the country where I come from, in Jordan. There's a significant difference in kind of discrimination between Jordanians of Jordanian origin and Jordanians of Palestinian origin. Ladies and gentlemen, although they're all treated as citizens, all officially under the law treated equally, in society, ladies and gentlemen, there's still a tremendous amount of discrimination. So, by, for example, allowing refugees in Sweden to continue to cheapening out citizenship by just giving it out to just a card or some money like that, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, you're only fostering discrimination because you're saying, hey, all these people over here who are different from us, we're not trying to force them to be the same as you, and as a result, you're just forcing some sort of social friction to come into account. And we've seen many such riots, for example, of refugees, of clashes between, for example, refugees and locals of a country. Bahrain is a perfect example of such a thing, which has led to many deaths, unfortunately. A couple of stuff. No, thank you. Just looking for my substantial. To further my reputations. For example, we were talking about mercenaries, for example. We were talking mercenaries, and we were talking about how they were saying how mercenaries go to the highest bidder, whereas across some citizenship, then that's not also the case. But ladies and gentlemen, citizenship is not that fundamentally different than money. As much as you can say, okay, hey, they will just be citizens of that country, they're guaranteed rights and so on and so forth. We can just say, for example, if that were the case, if this is such a case where it's being employed at large, we can just allow so many other countries to for example, try to auction for this one specific man and try to buy him into place. Ladies and gentlemen, the biggest point that I'm trying to make over here is that in order to, for example, be a citizen, in order to maintain the threshold for citizenship to such a high degree, it's something to be treasured and honored, it's something to be seen as noble, they do need to share the same values as the countries they're living in. And they've just mentioned assertion, they didn't really prove anything how that's not the case. And you also need to so one, share the same values, and two, prove their loyalty. Ladies ladies and gentlemen, the reason why I'm saying, for example, like loyalty is not guaranteed is because, once again, if you just look at the calculations of guaranteed death to chance of death and that, like a guaranteed death versus a small chance of death and a small chance of living, you look at small chance of living. That does not in any way guarantee their loyalty to anyone whatsoever, and they're just looking for like what's best for themselves. Because humans are inherently selfish, they will easily, the whole idea of like their own loyalty is not like it cannot easily be proven as they'd like it to be. And we also brought to the notion of like national security, how in order to prevent treason, you need to like secure like background checks and secure like and so on and so forth. And they initially like we mentioned how this stuff can be done. Therefore, loyalty cannot be guaranteed, and you cannot like ensure that the values will be the same as the values of others. Because what I'm trying to say is that like if their model were to be approved, then you don't share the same values. You just need to like know how to fight. And once again, in addition to like coming back to as violent citizens, you're also injecting some other problems such as PTSD and same problems the veterans currently face. And likewise, and therefore, in order to prove that you have the same values as them, we encourage them to, for example, go and invest, for example, for a period of 15 years or more, and so on and so forth. That's the best way to ensure the value of nationality is upheld. For all reasons, we're very proud to propose.
I'd like to thank the speaker for the fine speech. We're now moving to the second half of this debate. I would like to invite a member of the government.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Shout out to Georgetown for being here and supporting us. So I'm going to do two very simple things in today's debate. First, I'm going to show you why it's okay to sell citizenship based on a contract. And secondly, I'm going to show you why it's okay to do that in exchange for military service. Let's look at but before I get into that, on that, I have two extensions. First, we believe that it's okay to sell citizenship. We believe that citizenship is arbitrary in the first place, right? Because think about the lottery of birth, right? Think about anchor babies in America. We believe that citizenship is no longer a value that's upheld, that's something to be honored about. Secondly, I'm going to tell you why then is it okay to sell that with military. Before I get into my substantives, let's talk about what the debate has been so far. So opening governments, basically they're telling you why if someone serves in the military, they deserve citizenship, right? Why they deserve this honorary value of being branded as a citizen of a country. We think there's much more analysis beyond that, which I will get into. Secondly, the opposition, basically their whole line of argument is people sending foreigners to the army is not enough to integrate them, right? Sending them to the army doesn't teach them the values that a country possesses, and it just teaches them how to fight, right? Well, I've been to the army in Korea. I think I'm the only one of the age that's been to the army. And I can assure you that it teaches you more than just how to fight. All right, let's talk about. It was kind of tricky to think of rebuttals because not only because the second speaker came out and had to think of his substantial arguments, but we don't think. I think, and also because we feel like most of the rebuttals will be dealt with in the government's extensions. So let's move on to the first things. First extension. Let's first take a look at the policy on the table, and then I'm going to look at the current status quo before moving into the extensions. First, we believe that it's reasonable to assume that any government that wishes to do this policy would have a reasonable amount of background check, right? They wouldn't accept someone who's been charged with 4 different counts of treason and accept them into the military in exchange for citizenship, right? We think that's a reasonable assumption to make. Similarly, we wouldn't accept people with 8 accounts of murder or rape or any of that sort. Now let's look at the current status quo. What's the problem here? We see with refugees, not just with refugees, with foreigners everywhere, we see them not being integrated as fully as part of a country, as a citizen, right? We concede to this. We concede that when immigrants move without knowing the language, without knowing the culture, they tend to form communities within that country and rely on that country, right? We completely agree that some immigrants do not integrate well into that country. Secondly, the current status quo is that not every country in the world's military are in active war zones, right? And that's where my extension fits in. We believe that when opening government told you that it's okay, or foreigners who serve in a country's military deserve citizenship, we're going to tell you why it's okay to open this policy up to every single country in the world. We believe that in countries like Sweden or Norway, where there's barely any military conflict, this policy should still be able to apply. We believe that this policy should apply to people who have no interest in the politics of Sweden, no interest in the ideologies of Sweden, but just want a passport and thus want to go to the military. We think that is perfectly okay. Why do we think it's okay to give away or sell citizenship? Because we believe that this is like a new form of social contract that's better than the existing one. We believe that citizenship is overrated, right? We don't think that the lottery of where you tend to be born gets to determine how you identify, or doesn't define your choice to identify with that country. If I was born 100 kilometers north of where I was born, I would be North Korean, right? We think in those terms, citizenship should not be considered an absolute, right? Secondly, no thank you. In Qatar, you become a citizen by becoming its national athlete, right? In countries like Chad, you can buy a diplomatic passport if you make a generous, donation to the government. We believe that it's very arbitrary on what grounds citizenship is granted, and we don't think it holds the same prestige and honor as they think it does. So why then, we believe that under these terms, then this is truly a social contract, right? Because if you're born into a country and you don't like the contract that you have with the government, if I don't identify with the values of being a Korean, I can't really opt out of it, right? No, thank you. And first of all, I was born there. I wasn't, aware. I didn't logically sign a contract with my government, right? However, this contract is different. It's a foreigner, willingly entering into a contract with that government, saying that I will provide these services in exchange for being your citizen. We think that this is perfectly okay, and that people and countries should have a right to pursue this. No, thank you. Please. No, thank you. Sorry. So I've told you so far why it's okay to sell citizenship, because of all these reasons. Now, I'm going to tell you why it's okay to sell citizenship in exchange for military service. Let's look at some of the problems that I've described so far. We believe that, yes, refugees not integrating into the society is a huge problem. However, we believe that military service is going to solve this. In fact, we believe that military service is going to be an extremely efficient policy of integration for foreigners that want to move to a different country. Why? Because in military, it's not just about how strong you are, it's really about communication. Right? You need to be able to communicate with your comrades, with your platoon, to actually carry out attacks and drills, right? And because that is valued, people will have to learn a language. Will have to learn the language that's used in that country's military, right? They will you're out of order. In the time they serve in the military, they will inevitably pick up the culture, they will inevitably pick up the norms, they will pick up the way that people act in certain situations when they're part of a larger military taking orders. They will know how hierarchy works, specifically to this country, right? More importantly, when they carry out drills or training exercises within that platoon, in that military, it's going to give them a sense of belonging, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that that's also going to feed into identifying myself as a citizen of a country. And we believe that problems with refugees and foreigners not interacting in these countries comes because they don't identify themselves as a Korean, as a Swedish, or as a Norwegian, right? We think having them serve in the military for a specific number of years before they get citizenship is going to cure most of these problems. Because I've shown you why it's okay to sell citizenship, and because I've shown you why military is actually a great way to sell citizenship, we are very proud to propose.
I'd like to thank the speaker for the fine speech. Now I'd like to invite the member of opposition.
I think this debate is missing a lot of characterization of the actual actors in this motion, right? And what they want, what are their motives, and particularly why this is important for the debate. Let's look at what countries we're talking about here, right? Because we don't really get a clear definition of how many years you spend, what is the necessity that you need to come in, do you need expertise, do you not need such? Nothing came from OG, which is why this debate seems really confusing. We don't know how many years, so thus we can't make any comparatives on how long it is on the alternative, right? We think that this is particularly important. We talk about Sweden and then active service, but Sweden doesn't go to war. Let's look at the countries that we're talking about, right? This is the characterization that we're going to bring you. And we bring you 3 unique extensions that bring you actual harms. We talk about how this causes problems within the military. We talk about the idea of brain suck, which is a new word I made up. We talk about how there's no expertise needed for you to go into the military and why this is particularly problematic. But first, in order for our analysis to stand, we need to uniquely prove to you why this having this exists, right? Because remember, the point here is, and they never made it, which would be great for them, is to say we're not forcing countries to only give citizenship on the sole basis of military, rather it's just another form of attaining citizenship. Thus, we need to prove to you why we think this will become the more prevalent form of attaining citizenship when in comparison to how you normally bring citizenship. Okay, characterization. The countries that you're planning to go to are often countries that you go to for economic reasons or safety reasons. And it is often very hard in these high-class countries for you to get citizenship. Therefore, we think in the likelihood of you being able to do something that is more concrete, like just going to the military, do this many years, and you will get it, rather than having to have a business proposal, rather than have to renew visas, rather than guessing if you're going to make money, rather than guessing if you're going to be renewed to stay. All these things are not stable. But rather than rather than doing these, you are now able to go to the military. We think that most people will opt to do this, right? And this is particularly problematic for a number of reasons. I think that the number one reason that we think this is problematic is because it means that we are bringing in individuals purely on the basis of them being able to join the military, right? And we also think it's problematic, like, there's so many reasons. Okay, first of all, we're bringing in people not on the basis of their expertise, not on the basis of whether they can contribute to society. Therefore, after they do their active military service, or after they do this military service, they go into society and we don't know if they can become doctors, if they can contribute, if they'll just sit around and worry about welfare. We don't look at this. There's no long-term analysis from their side, which is why a lot of their analysis falls, right? We think that it's pretty simplistic for them to just say, this will happen, there'll be integration, blah, blah, blah. But we've had a really constricted debate here, right? When we're looking at the long term, who are these people? Who are they coming? What do they want? Secondly, if the strongest argument for this is refugees and being able to use refugees, giving refugees an avenue to be able to come in, right? Again, the analysis still stands, but we think this is particularly problematic, again, for a number of reasons. One of them being that then countries can opt out and say, look, we are bringing in refugees and we're helping them and so on. But in reality, you're not bringing in children, you're not bringing in women, you're not bringing in weak people who are unable to serve in the military. You are bringing only a certain segment of society with refugees, and therefore you're able to tell to everyone else that you're doing what you need to, rather than on the comparative where you're forced to actually take care of refugees. I know it's late to do a rebuttal, but I want to get some things out of the way. On their point of accountability. Sir. No. On their accountability. They said mercenaries are not accountable, but if you have them in the army, they're accountable. And then when I said to people about Iraq had so many war crimes. There was Belgrade, there was the prison in which there was rapes and murders, and no one was held accountable. Bush wasn't held accountable, the people there weren't held accountable. This argument just feels, even though spent 3 minutes of it in the last speech, doesn't seem relevant when we're talking about armies often don't get accountable for what they do unless they're on the losing side. No. Okay, no. They talk about this idea of risk your life. A lot of their analysis falls when they bring up something like Sweden. These countries that we're talking about, why this characterization is important, are countries that don't often go to war. And if they do so, they go to non-high risk countries. These people are not risking their lives, and that's why it goes back to our initial characterization of why they are more likely to opt into doing military service, rather than what a lot of analysis from OG told you about why it's particularly important for you to do the long level of integration and assimilate to society. Okay, from Johnson. Why citizenship is arbitrary. Okay, we're not debating whether or not you should give people citizenship. We're talking about whether you should give it to them by just enlisting in the military. We don't care if you give them citizenship because they have athletes or whatever, or give them citizenship for spending 100 years. We'll deal with those individually. But in the case of the military, this is why we think it's particularly problematic. I'm not here trying to be citizenship Jesus, telling you that it's sacred and holy and we shouldn't do anything with it. I particularly don't care. I only care about what ends up happening to individuals and what ends up happening to the country. Yusuf says it's okay a lot, and it was like, we think it's okay to do this, we think it's okay to do that, but never really gives us any substantial reasons why it's okay for us to sell citizenship and so on. But again, we're not even debating on this, and it makes it very hard to rebut his analysis. Okay. He talked about how military will help people integrate. Now, going back to the, rebutting this with one of my points. If we're talking about integration in the military, already in militaries around the world, particularly in the United States, there is discrimination against people of African American descent. People against women who are often raped and not being and discriminated because not just because of race, but also because of gender. Can you imagine then bringing someone who has an accent, someone who doesn't speak English properly, even if he passes an IELTS or something, right? We think it's particularly problematic then for you to be so naive as to say, oh, communication, right? I think it's a little bit more complex than that. In the sense that it's much more hard for you to homogenize a completely more non-homogeneous army. No. This debate is just so hard because OG doesn't tell us how many people they're going to bring in, who are they going to bring in, how many years. There's nothing. Okay. I think, okay, brain science. Oh, yeah, I'll take it.
Yes. So we understand that people might, like, you're not making sense because you're the one that said we're not only allowing foreigners to grant citizenship by the military.
Can you repeat your why?
Whatever, the analysis that you provided about how they don't adjust to the army and whatnot doesn't really make sense because you're the one that said we're not going to, or military service is not the only way for foreigners to gain citizenship.
Yeah, okay, but we already, OG's analysis still stands in the sense that if I'm someone, look, my father, when he was 21 years old, went to the United Kingdom, didn't know how to speak English, didn't care about the culture, didn't know anything. It took him 15 years to understand, to become part of the culture, and to bring in children who also believe in the culture and those values, which is why I'm debating here in British parliamentary debate, right? And I think that that is a much more, which is OG's analysis, but it's not that impressive without our analysis, is saying that this is the better way forward, right? In order to ensure people are more integrated and care about it. It's just, on average, it's better. I'm not going to say every time it's going to work. Okay. Earning and learning rather than earning and not learning. Put me off. Yes, brain suck. Right. So if you have doctors and engineers who find it easier to come to this country and in this for a few years rather than work for tens of years like my father did to get a citizenship, then you have these people in the military for a long time, given if these doctors even decide to go to these countries in the first place, which we've told you analysis that you don't have to have them based on their skills, but if they do, then you are removing a large segment of people from the society and putting them into the military and they're no longer contributing, rather than them coming immediately, contributing and taking more years, more time in order to help.
I'd like to thank the speaker for the fine speech, and I would like to now invite the government to work. Thank you.
Just because I was born in some little country in South Africa and just because I was black doesn't mean I don't have the etiquettes or I don't have the abilities to integrate with someone else in the world. And I don't have the ability to integrate within countries such as the USA. If I want to do that, I should be able to have the right, I should be able to have the means to do so, and that is what we're telling you. We're telling you should be, just because you're born in some country doesn't mean you have to be the citizen for that country for the rest of your life. If you want to be a citizen of another country, you're allowed to do that. And if countries want to do that through military service, we're allowing them to do it through military service, and we're also telling you why it's actually a good thing that they're doing it through military service, and that's what I'm going to prove to you in the issues that this debate boiled down to, which were two, right? What is citizenship and when is it legitimately given out? And secondly, I'm going to talk to you about how military service plays a role, an important role in this entire concept. But before that, let's talk to you about the two things Musa talked about or claimed to talk but never did. First he said he's going to talk about some problems within the military that it causes, right? So he clearly doesn't know how military works because apparently when you go to a military in another country, you don't have to learn the language of that country to actually be able to defend that country. If I'm going to South Korea to defend South Korea, I don't have to, if I'm a nurse in a South Korean army, apparently I don't need to know Korean to actually be able to treat those people. So we think he doesn't really know how military works. He doesn't, and we tell you that yes, those problems won't exist because you will have to learn that language eventually, and you will have to do it, and it will be important. No, thank you. And secondly, he talked about something about brain sucking in the after the 7th minute of his speech about doctors and them going out. That's not even related to the military. I don't know how a military person comes into your country and takes away your military expertise just because you served in your army. If you wanted that to be relevant in the debate, you should have probably explained it. So, which brings me on to my first issue of this debate, which is what is citizenship and when is it legitimately given out, right? Jordan came here and explained to you in like a bunch of good minutes that citizenship is an arbitrary thing. It is already in the status quo a transaction as it stands, right? You give out citizenship to people, you take citizenship from people, and you do so on many different levels and many different reasons, right? And he told you that, and then they came up here, oh, you know, you can't give them citizenship because in countries such as Sweden, they don't actually go to war and their life isn't really at stake. We tell you, we don't care if they go to war or don't, right? We believe it's the idea of citizenship is something that we can give them anyway, right? And Jordan went to great length to explain to you how this is a social contract which you're actually signing, and it is informed when you sign it. If I was born in another country, I didn't sign that social contract with that country, but if I'm going to another country and taking their citizenship, my ideologies and my values are more likely to align with that country because I'm an informed person and I'm signing that contract on the basis of my ability and my intellect. No, thank you. And that's exactly why this is a better form of social contract. And citizenships, if you have a problem with citizenship being given out, then you should have a problem with that, right? So which takes me on to why military service is a better way to do it, which was mostly where this debate happened, right? And because they never really told us why citizenship was important, I feel like that one argument goes to the government. So let's talk to you about what being a part of someone's country's army does, right? We believe firstly it's very important that when someone comes in your country, we tell you that they're trying to sacrifice their life for you, and it is very much likely that their values align with you if they're trying to sacrifice their life, and you need to recognize them for those efforts, right? And in order to recognize them to the best of your capability, you need to give them, giving them citizenship is a good way to go about it, right? And secondly, Jordan went to great length to explain you how when they're serving within an army has more purposes than to actually be a stand-in army and fight with platoons, right? When you work within an army, you have a lot of training exercises which allow you to assimilate with those people, which allow you to understand the culture and the values of the people. You have to learn the language of those people, and eventually, after like say 2, 3, or how many years that country wants to give you, I'll take it in a minute. How many years that country wants to give you, you have a sense of belonging to that army, to that nation, and why is that important? I'll explain to you after this.
We've already proven to you that people that speak the language, born in the country, African Americans, are still racially abused. What do you think about people coming with an accent, even if they
just
speak
because they're racially abused, then you're essentially against people going to other countries because they're so different and they're going to be discriminated against. I don't know why that has anything to do with being given citizenship on the basis of being in the military, right? So so why is that sense of belonging that is created within an army setting important? Because it's going to make you a part of that country. You're going to have that feeling for the rest of your life that I fought for this country, for its values and for its people. I protected its people, and that is exactly why I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of that nation. And even if you're not given citizenship, that essentially makes you a part of that nation. And that is exactly why we believe they should be given that citizenship. What was Musa's alternative to that? Have them have a business proposal. I don't understand how that even makes sense, because if you have an awesome business proposal and you want to be a Qatari citizen, you can already do that. You can already come up and give your business proposal and pursue citizenship through that process. We're talking about people who want to pursue citizenship through other processes. But then his problem was, well, you will have lack of intellect and lack of trained personnel coming within your country. We tell you no. You do require a lot of training and you do require a lot of expertise to actually be a part of the army. If you're a doctor within the army, you are required to have that expertise. If you're a scientist within the army, you're required to have that expertise, right? So we believe if I'm just a random person who doesn't know what to do with my life, I can't just go ahead and be in the army. I either have to be physically strong or I have to have some intellectual capabilities to be a part of that army. And that preliminary process is a responsibility of the country who's actually employing me within that army. If you're just recruiting just anyone in the world, then that's a problem with your preliminary process, and that's what you need to change. Not you don't need to change what effectively happens to someone who has already served within your army, right? And then he had something about, and then the debate came down to something about refugees and how if people started giving citizenship to people on the basis of their military service, you won't go around and have refugees anymore. We don't understand how that's possible, because the reason you recruit people in your army are very different from why you take refugees within your country. You take refugees for a whole set of other reasons, which is your global relations or generally your altruistic nature, right? We tell you no, and that has nothing to do with this scenario. So because we're protecting the right of the person who wants to be a part of another citizen of another country and giving them citizenship on the basis of a system that is actually going to evaluate their values, ideologies, and their liberties, we're very, very proud to oppose. Thank you.
I would like to thank the speaker for the fine speech, and now to conclude this debate, I would like to invite the opposition whip.
Government itself has this notion that, opening government came up and said that we should give them citizenship on the basis of them serving in the military because they're really sacrificing their lives, they're putting themselves on the line for the country because they love the country, because they want to serve the country, because their views are in line with the country's views and values itself. We don't really feel that's really true. As Musa mentioned, people are inherently selfish in nature in which they do this. So they're not doing it because they love the country. They're doing it to get their own personal gain. They're doing it to get citizenship, which is a personal benefit for them. So we don't really feel that this whole notion that through the military you foster loyalty, through the military you kind of create a sense of attachment between the individual and the country itself really stands, because it's all at the end of the day for personal gain. And we don't really feel that it was kind of OG's job to explain what citizenship is and how valuable it is. It's given that citizenship is valuable as it gives you the right to vote, it gives you the right, everything from the right to vote to the right to drive. No, thank you. The right to vote and the right to drive. So we believe that it is something that people seek after, and it's not something that's as arbitrary as they assume it to be. And it's rather hypocritical on part of the closing government whip to say that, oh, it's arbitrary, so I should have the choice to get a citizenship from wherever I want to, but we'll also implement stricter background checks and policies to kind of stop them from getting those. So it's kind of contradictory on their stance as well. Moving on, so they also claim that the military is the same as society in itself, but we don't really stand for that because, like Musa mentioned, there is racism on the basis of accents or not. Let's assume that, okay, communication does occur. We conceded to that. Musa never said that they won't learn the language. They said there will be racism, there will be discrimination on the basis of language, on the basis of accent, on the basis of the way they talk, on the basis of their values, on the traditions they follow, on the way they look. And it's already prevalent in countries like America with racial communities like the African Americans, and it will be even more so prevalent when you bring about more refugees from different nationalities. And then they're like, oh, the military is exactly the same as society, so no thank you. So they'll get the same exposure in the military as they would in society. That doesn't really stand, because you're not exposed to the community itself, you're not exposed to the country itself, you're not exposed to the language and the way it operates. And due to the lack of definition given, no thank you. Due to the lack of definition given, no thank you. Due to the lack of definition given from OG in the first place, you don't really know how long they'll serve in the military in the first place. Let's assume they won't serve in the military forever, and then they'll give the citizenship eventually. What then? You gave someone citizenship, all the rights of a citizen of that nation on the basis of them simply serving in the military, all right? And then they said, oh yeah, they're not doing anything because in countries like Sweden and Norway, they're not really in conflict situations where they're risking their life. We're okay with that. So have no contribution to the country itself, have no concrete contribution in itself, but yeah, we'll give you citizenship on the basis of that. So we don't really see how that stands as well.
Sir,
No, thank you. Moreover, Fatima came over and said that, oh, Musa's point of how doctors and engineers won't be able to contribute to the best ability doesn't really stand. It's kind of sad to see a Georgetown student not understand the concept of opportunity cost, but oh well, let's explain it anyways. So what happens really is that these individuals will opt to serve the military in countries, in non-conflict countries like Norway and Sweden, because it's much easier to get it, because they're not really putting their lives at risk like government conceded. So what they'll do is, instead of contributing to society in itself by making the best use of their skills, of their abilities, they'll actually just go and serve in the military, thank you. They'll go serve in the military and get the citizenship, which is essentially what they want at the end of the day. Moving on, it's kind of, thank you. It's kind of funny how they say that we don't really care how they risk their lives, or they risk their lives, or they don't risk their lives, we don't really care about that. But at the end of the day, they say that, yeah, everyone should have the chance to sign this social contract, and we want to make them part of society. Well, there's no real long-run analysis of this at any point in the government bench, opening and closing included. But they don't really analyze what happens after the military service. They don't really say how we're going to include them in the society. Musa pointed out that after, Musa pointed out that after they leave the service, after they leave service, they form social conclaves. So they won't have the adequate skills, because you cannot know background checks in the first place, to inculcate themselves, integrate themselves into society in the first place. And that goes against what OG's point was, that, oh, this way you're actually stopping racism, because it was kind of hypocritical in the sense, because the first speaker got up and said, yeah, it decreases racism, and the second speaker said, yeah, we don't really care that if their values are in line with that of the country, but we'll still let them in. So how is bringing in people whose values are not in line with that of the nation's inhabitants kind of decrease racism? We believe that it increases clashes, it increases racism in itself, and it increases the ability of the society to form a proper mechanism to actually inculcate all the refugees, all these immigrants in themselves. And it also gives people, like I mentioned before, it also gives people the ability to kind of cop out and get citizenship in an easy way, especially in countries with non-conflict zones. Let's look at countries in which there are conflict zones. We mentioned racism before. Let's assume that there is a country where people are actually risking their lives. What happens then? As a country, as the military in itself, would you rather send your own people, your own citizens in the line of fire, or would you send these refugees who aren't really your citizens in that line of fire? So we believe that it's an unfair, discriminatory endangerment of the lives of these people who themselves will be unnecessarily put themselves at risk. Moreover, they were like, I'll take closer.
If there is someone who's actually putting their lives at danger, do you recognize that as big enough sacrifice for them to be recognized as citizens?
I think this is a very hypothetical notion where they say, oh, someone's really putting their lives at risk and they're going to go and fight in the war. But we believe that, all right, let's assume for now that this does stand, right? But it doesn't outweigh the consequences that will happen in the person in the first place. You're not putting their lives equally at risk with the citizen of the military individual serving who's a citizen of the country itself already, right? So they're putting their lives in danger for no reason, which is kind of endangering the life in an excessive way, which is something we don't stand for. Moving on to, just to conclude, we believe that citizenship, and it kind of comes in the scope of the debate, and it falls on OG's responsibility to describe citizenship and how it's important itself. So we don't believe it's just something arbitrary or just a social contract, it's something important, and you can't just give people citizenship on the basis of military. And again, they've painted the image that, oh, we're saying no citizenship whatsoever. We're not saying that. We're saying give them citizenship. Citizenship is something that should be given to individuals from abroad, as long as they contribute to society in a concrete way, and not in ways in which they don't really contribute to society in a tangible way. So that's what we're happy to oppose.
I would like to thank the speaker for the fine speech. I would like to thank all the debaters for this debate. Let's give them another round of applause. The judges will now leave the room to judge the debate, and Hannah is going to tell you what to do.